My name is Jocelyn, I'm 28 years old, and I'm standing in my childhood home's kitchen at 2 in the morning, scrubbing dishes while my younger siblings sleep peacefully upstairs. But this isn't just another night of endless chores. No, tonight is different because I finally found my mother's journal with a list that changed everything. The title read Reasons Why Jocelyn Must Work Harder, and the first entry made my blood run cold. She's not as naturally gifted as the others. Hard work is her only path to success. That night changed everything, but the real betrayal? It started 20 years earlier. Before I dive into this story that shaped my entire life, I want to know where you're watching from today. Are you someone who understands what it's like to be the family workhorse while others get a free pass? Please hit that like button if you've ever felt invisible in your own home, and don't forget to subscribe because this story is about to reveal family secrets that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about favoritism. Trust me, what comes next will show you that sometimes the people who should protect us the most become our biggest adversaries. Growing up in our suburban home in Ohio, I learned early that there were two sets of rules in the Henderson household. One for me and another entirely different set for my younger twin siblings, Blake and Brittany. My mother Helen made sure I understood my place from the moment I could walk. While the twins, for years younger than me, were treated like royalty, I was more like the hired help who never got paid and definitely never got a day off. My daily routine started at 5 in the morning, long before the sun came up. I'd creep downstairs in the dark, careful not to wake anyone, and begin preparing breakfast for the family. 3 different meals because, of course, the twins had specific preferences that changed weekly, and God forbid they eat the same thing as each other, or heaven help us all if Blake's eggs were too runny or Brittany's toast was too dark. By 6:30, I'd have their lunches packed, their backpacks organized, and their clothes laid out while they slept soundly in their matching princess and prince-themed bedrooms. The twins wouldn't grace us with their presents until 8 in the morning, just in time to eat the breakfast I'd prepared and complain about something being wrong with it. Helen would coo over them, fixing their hair, praising them for merely existing while I stood at the sink, washing their dishes before rushing to catch the earlier bus to school. You see, I had to take the early bus because the regular bus time would interfere with my afternoon chore schedule. "They're special, Jocelyn," my mother would say whenever I dared to question why I had to clean the entire house every Saturday while Blake and Brittany went to their various activities. "You're stronger. You can handle more." It's a compliment, really. I'm preparing you for the real world. The real world, apparently, meant being everyone's servant while watching others live the life you could only dream about. The twins had designer clothes from the mall, new backpacks every school year, and their rooms looked like something out of a catalog. Me? I got their hand-me-downs when they outgrew them, even though I was older and had been wearing the same faded clothes for years. When relatives sent birthday money, Helen would take mine for household expenses while the twins' money went straight into their piggy banks. My father Wayne was around, technically, but he might as well have been a ghost. He'd watch Helen's blatant favoritism with this pained expression, occasionally clearing his throat like he might say something, but he never did. He'd sometimes slip me an extra $5 here and there with a guilty look, as if that made up for his silence. His weakness frustrated me more than Helen's cruelty because at least she was honest about her feelings toward me. I'll never forget my 10th birthday. I woke up that morning with the tiniest hope that maybe, just maybe, this would be the day things would be different. Instead, Helen informed me that the garage needed a deep clean, and wasn't I lucky to have the whole day to get it done? While I sorted through boxes of junk and scrubbed oil stains off concrete, the twins went to Disneyland. They came back with mouse ears and stories about riding Space Mountain 3 times while I nursed blisters from the industrial cleaner Helen insisted I use. My grades were exceptional, top of my class consistently, but that didn't matter. When I brought home straight A's, Helen would glance at my report card and say, "Well, that's expected. You don't have the twins' social obligations." When Blake and Brittany brought home C's and D's, she'd throw them a pizza party for trying their best. The refrigerator was covered in their mediocre art projects and participation certificates while my academic achievement awards got shoved in a drawer. Helen had even written out family rules and posted them on the refrigerator. Under my name: wake up by 5, prepare all meals, clean all bathrooms daily, vacuum common areas, do everyone's laundry, maintain straight A's, no social activities that interfere with household duties. Under the twins' names: keep rooms tidy, which they never did, and guess who had to clean them, be respectful, which they never were, and try their best in school, which apparently meant showing up occasionally. The neighbors noticed, of course they did. Mrs. Patterson next door would watch me mowing the lawn in 90-degree heat while the twins splashed in their above-ground pool, and she'd purse her lips but say nothing. At family gatherings, relatives would make comments like, "Jocelyn is so helpful," and "You're lucky to have such a responsible daughter," but never, "Why is a 10-year-old doing all your housework?" When I turned 12, I attempted my first rebellion. Blake and Brittany had left their dirty clothes scattered across their rooms for weeks, expecting me to gather, wash, fold, and put everything away as usual. I refused. I simply didn't do it. Helen's reaction was swift and severe. She didn't yell or hit me, no, that would have been too obvious. Instead, she stopped speaking to me entirely for a week. No good morning, no acknowledgement of my presence, nothing. She'd talk around me at dinner, pretending I wasn't there while making sure I still served everyone their food. The twins found it hilarious, making jokes about the invisible sister. By day 6, I was so emotionally destroyed that I not only did their laundry but reorganized their entire closets. Helen finally looked at me again and said, "I knew you'd come to your senses." The only person who seemed to see the injustice was my Aunt Ruth, my father's sister. She'd visit occasionally and always made a point of praising me directly, bringing me small gifts that Helen couldn't claim were for the household. She'd pull me aside and whisper, "This isn't right, sweetheart. You remember that, okay? This isn't right." Those words became my lifeline, the tiny thread of validation that kept me from completely losing myself in the servant role my mother had assigned me. By the time I reached high school, the weight of being the Henderson family's unpaid labor force had evolved into something even more insidious. Helen had discovered that I could work outside the home and bring in actual money, which opened up a whole new avenue of exploitation. At 14, I got my worker's permit and started washing dishes at a local restaurant after school. The twins, now 10, had their schedules packed with dance classes, soccer practice, and piano lessons, all funded by what Helen called the family fund, which was essentially every penny I earned. "We all contribute to this family in different ways," Helen would say as she pocketed my paycheck each week. "Blake and Brittany contribute by excelling in their activities, bringing honor to our family name. You contribute by working. It's all about playing to our strengths." My strength, apparently, was being a workhorse who never complained, or at least not out loud. The day the twins turned 16 was when the disparity reached new, almost laughable heights. I watched from the kitchen window, my hands deep in soapy water from washing the breakfast dishes, as Helen led Blake and Brittany outside with their eyes covered. In the driveway sat 2 cars, a red Honda Civic for Blake and a blue one for Brittany, complete with giant bows on top. The twins screamed with delight, jumping up and down, while Helen beamed at them like they'd just cured cancer instead of simply existing for 16 years. "Jocelyn," Helen called out, not even looking at me, "make sure you have those cars washed every Sunday. We want to keep them looking nice." That was my gift for their birthday, apparently, 2 more items added to my endless list of responsibilities. But the cars were nothing compared to what happened when college application season arrived. I had worked myself to the bone maintaining a 4.0 GPA while juggling a part-time job and running the household. My teachers had written glowing recommendation letters, and I'd been accepted to Northwestern University with a partial academic scholarship. The night I got my acceptance letter was the first time in years I felt like maybe, just maybe, my life could be different. I approached Helen with the paperwork for the federal financial aid forms, my hands shaking with excitement and nervousness. She was sitting at the kitchen table, helping the twins with their homework, which meant doing it for them while they texted their friends. She looked at the papers I'd placed in front of her, then up at me with an expression I'd never seen before. It was calculating, cold, like a snake deciding whether to strike. Northwestern, she said slowly, as if tasting the word. That's quite expensive, even with this scholarship. And so far from home. Who would take care of things here? I thought maybe it was time for Blake and Brittany to start helping out more, I suggested carefully. They're almost 18 now, they could dash. The slap came so fast I didn't see it coming. My cheek burned as Helen stood up, her face twisted with rage. Know your place, she hissed. You think you're better than us? Think you can abandon your family? Community college is more than enough for someone like you. You can live at home and continue contributing to this family like you should. My father, who had been watching TV in the living room, appeared in the doorway at the sound of the slap. For a moment, I thought finally he would stand up for me. He opened his mouth, closed it, then mumbled something about needing to check something in the garage and disappeared. That was the moment I truly understood that I was completely alone in this. What I discovered later, through a combination of overheard conversations and snooping I'm not proud of, was even worse than the rejection itself. The twins had also applied to Northwestern, despite their mediocre grades and complete lack of extracurricular activities beyond the ones Helen paid for. Helen had hired someone to write their application essays, and, here's the kicker, she'd used my achievements as theirs. My volunteer work at the hospital became Blake's. My position as editor of the school newspaper became Brittany's. My summers spent tutoring underprivileged kids were split between them as a joint initiative they'd started together. When I confronted Helen about this, she didn't even try to deny it. They deserve those opportunities, she said simply. You'll be fine without them. You're resilient, remember? That's your gift. The twins need more help to succeed. Ms. Peterson, my AP English teacher, tried to intervene when she learned I was declining Northwestern's offer. She even called Helen directly, offering to help find additional financial aid, explaining how rare and valuable this opportunity was. Helen's response was to threaten Ms. Peterson with a lawsuit for harassment, claiming she was overstepping boundaries and trying to destroy our family. After that, teachers still looked at me with pity, but none dared to get involved. So I watched as the twins celebrated their acceptances to Northwestern, my dream school, with a huge party that I, of course, had to plan and clean up after. Their friends congratulated them on their amazing volunteer work and leadership experience while I served appetizers and kept my mouth shut. Helen had made it clear that if I said anything to embarrass the family, I would find myself on the street with nothing. Community college wasn't bad academically, but the logistics were a nightmare. I had to schedule all my classes around my work schedule and chore responsibilities. This meant taking mostly night classes after working 8-hour shifts and completing all household duties. I'd get home at 11 at night and still have to prepare breakfast items for the morning, do a load of laundry, and clean whatever mess the twins had left in their wake. My health started to deteriorate rapidly. Chronic fatigue became my constant companion, along with anxiety that manifested in panic attacks I had to hide in bathroom stalls or walk in freezers at work. Depression crept in like fog, making everything feel hopeless and pointless. I lost weight I couldn't afford to lose, my hair started falling out from stress, and I developed a tremor in my hands that made it hard to carry trays at the restaurant. One night, I collapsed at work. Just dropped a full tray of dishes and went down with them. My manager, a kind woman named Carol who had always seemed to sense something was wrong at home, insisted on driving me to the emergency room. The doctor who examined me was blunt. "You're suffering from severe exhaustion and malnutrition," he said. "You need rest, proper nutrition, and probably therapy for what appears to be serious anxiety and depression. Is there someone at home who can help take care of you while you recover?" I almost laughed at that. Someone at home to take care of me? The only person who had ever shown me real kindness in that house was gone. Aunt Ruth had died suddenly 6 months earlier, and with her went the last bit of protection I had. Her death had been unexpected, a sudden heart attack they said, though she'd been in perfect health at her last checkup. I'd always wondered about the timing, coming just weeks after she'd told me she was planning to talk to a lawyer about my situation. The doctor sent me home with vitamins and a referral to a therapist I couldn't afford and wouldn't have time to see anyway. Carol drove me home in silence, but when she pulled up to the house, she turned to me and said, "You know, I have a daughter about your age. If she was being treated the way you are, I'd hope someone would help her. If you ever need anything, anything at all, you call me, okay?" I nodded, tears streaming down my face, knowing I'd never call. Helen had trained me too well. Family business stayed in the family, no matter what. By 22, I had finally reached my breaking point. Working 2 jobs while attending community college and maintaining the household had pushed me beyond exhaustion into a state of desperate determination. For 2 years, I'd been secretly saving money by picking up extra shifts and hiding cash in places I thought Helen would never look. Inside old tampon boxes, taped under drawers in my room, rolled up in pairs of socks I never wore. Every dollar represented a step closer to freedom, a future where I could breathe without asking permission. I had managed to save $8,000. It wasn't a fortune, but it was enough for a security deposit, first month's rent, and a cushion to start fresh somewhere far from the Henderson household. I'd researched apartments in different states, applied for jobs online using the library computer, and even had a couple of phone interviews. The plan was simple: wait until the twins left for their 3rd year at Northwestern, pack what little belonged to me, and disappear. But Helen had raised me, molded me, and apparently knew me better than I knew myself. The day I went to the bank to withdraw my savings for the apartment deposit I'd been approved for in Colorado, the teller frowned at her screen. "I'm showing a zero balance in this account, Miss Henderson. The funds were withdrawn 3 days ago." My hands went numb. "That's impossible. I'm the only one on this account. Check again, please." She did, then showed me the screen. There it was, $8,000 withdrawn for a family emergency by Helen Henderson, listed as a joint account holder. I had opened the account when I was 17, and of course Helen had insisted on being added just in case something happened. I'd been so young, so conditioned to obey, that I hadn't thought twice about it. I drove home in a daze, my escape plan crumbling like ash. Helen was in the kitchen, calmly making herself tea, when I burst in. "You stole my money," I said, my voice shaking with rage I'd never allowed myself to feel before. She didn't even look up. "Steal? From my own daughter? Don't be dramatic. The twins needed funds for their study abroad program in Italy. Family helps family, Jocelyn. You know that. That was my money. My future." I was screaming now, years of suppressed anger erupting. I worked for every penny of that. While living under my roof, eating my food, using my electricity, Helen countered, finally meeting my eyes. "You owe this family everything. Did you really think you could just abandon us? After everything we've done for you? Everything you've done for me?" I laughed, but it came out sounding unhinged. "You mean treating me like a slave? Stealing my childhood? Giving everything to Blake and Brittany while I got nothing?" "You got exactly what you deserved," Helen said coldly. "No more, no less." That's when Aunt Ruth's estate lawyer called. The timing felt cosmic, like maybe there was still some justice in the universe. Aunt Ruth had left me $20,000 in her will, a fact that had been tied up in probate for months. The lawyer needed me to come sign papers to release the funds. For the first time in my life, I looked Helen directly in the eyes and said, "No. That money is mine. You're not touching it." Her face went through a series of expressions I'd never seen before, like she was cycling through different masks trying to find the right one. She settled on maternal disappointment. "After all I've sacrificed for you, this is how you repay me? By being selfish?" "Yes," I said simply. "I'm being selfish. For once in my life, I'm choosing myself." The retaliation was swift and brutal. I came home from my afternoon shift 3 days later to find the locks changed and my belongings scattered across the front lawn. Everything I owned had been rifled through, and important documents were notably missing. My birth certificate, social security card, even my community college transcripts were gone. Neighbors pretended not to see as I gathered my things in garbage bags, though I caught Mrs. Patterson peeking through her curtains. The twins had arrived home for winter break that morning, and they made sure to document my humiliation. Brittany posed next to my scattered belongings like they were part of a modern art installation, posting to Instagram with the caption, "When the ungrateful finally leave. Good riddance to family leeches." Blake added his own creative touch, throwing some of my clothes in the mud while filming for his TikTok, laughing about how the family servant finally got fired. My car became my home for the next 3 weeks. I'd park in 24-hour Walmart lots, shower at the gym where I'd managed to keep my membership active, and try to figure out my next move. The inheritance from Aunt Ruth was my lifeline, but I couldn't access it without the documents Helen had destroyed. Getting replacements would take time I didn't have. Carol, my manager at the restaurant, noticed I was wearing the same clothes days in a row and pulling double shifts every day. When she cornered me in the break room and demanded the truth, I broke down and told her everything. She immediately offered her couch, no questions asked, no rent required until I got back on my feet. For a brief moment, I thought things might finally turn around. I had a safe place to sleep, I was working on getting my documents replaced, and the inheritance was slowly working its way through the legal system. Then Helen struck again. She started calling the restaurant during peak hours, claiming I had stolen from her, that I was mentally unstable and dangerous. She filed false police reports saying I'd threatened the twins. She even showed up during a dinner rush, causing a scene, crying about her troubled daughter who refused to get help for her mental illness. My boss's boss, who didn't know me like Carol did, decided I was too much of a liability. Carol fought for me, but corporate policy was corporate policy. I was let go with a weak apology and my final paycheck, which barely covered my gym membership and phone bill. The lowest point came on a particularly cold January night. I was sitting in my car, engine off to save gas, wrapped in every piece of clothing I owned, when my phone buzzed. It was an email from the lawyer handling Aunt Ruth's estate. There had been a challenge to the will. Helen was claiming that as my legal guardian, she was entitled to any inheritance I received before age 25. The funds would be frozen indefinitely while the courts sorted it out. I stared at that email and seriously contemplated driving my car off the nearest bridge. The only thing that stopped me was remembering something Aunt Ruth had told me the last time I saw her. We'd been sitting in her garden, and she'd taken my face in her hands, looking at me with such fierce love it made my chest ache. "Your day will come, sweetheart," she'd said. "I know it doesn't feel like it now, but your day will come. And when it does, you'll be stronger than all of them combined because you'll have earned every bit of happiness you get. They'll never know that feeling, but you will. Promise me you'll stick around to see it." So I didn't drive off a bridge. Instead, I drove to a new city where Helen couldn't find me as easily, picked up whatever work I could find, and started rebuilding from absolute zero. It was a slow, painful process, but Aunt Ruth had been right about one thing: I was stronger than them. I had to be. I didn't have any other choice. 3 years passed before I heard from anyone in my family again. I'd managed to build something resembling a life in Charlotte, waiting tables at an upscale restaurant, sharing a decent apartment with 2 roommates, and slowly healing from decades of trauma with the help of a therapist I could finally afford. I'd even started dating someone, cautiously, carefully, still learning what it meant to be valued for who I was rather than what I could do for others. The call came on a Tuesday evening. I almost didn't answer when I saw my father's number, but something made me pick up. His voice was weak, strained, nothing like the booming authority he'd projected when I was young, even if he'd never used that authority to protect me. "Jocelyn?" He sounded surprised. I'd answered. "I'm sorry to call like this. I know you probably don't want to hear from me, but I'm sick. Really sick. And I need to tell you some things before it's too late." Every instinct screamed at me to hang up, to protect the peace I'd fought so hard to build. But underneath the anger, there was still that little girl who desperately wanted her father to love her enough to stand up for her. What kind of sick? Pancreatic cancer. Stage 4. The doctors say I have maybe a few months. He coughed, a wet, rattling sound. Helen doesn't know I'm calling. She's at the store with the twins. I need to see you, Jocelyn. There are things you need to know. I made the drive back to Ohio against my better judgment, my therapist's warnings echoing in my head about the dangers of reopening old wounds. But I had to know what was so important that my father would risk Helen's wrath to tell me. The man who answered the door was a shadow of the father I remembered. He'd lost at least 50 pounds, his skin had a grayish tint, and he moved like each step required enormous effort. Helen's car wasn't in the driveway, and he quickly ushered me inside, glancing nervously at the street. She'll be gone for at least 2 hours, he said, leading me to his study, a room I'd rarely been allowed to enter as a child. The twins are demanding some specific organic something or other that she has to drive across town to get. The study looked different than I remembered, less organized, papers scattered across every surface. Wayne collapsed into his desk chair and gestured for me to sit across from him. For a moment, we just stared at each other, years of unspoken words creating a chasm between us. I'm sorry, he finally said, and the words seemed to break something inside him. I'm so sorry, Jocelyn. For all of it. For being a coward. For letting her treat you that way. For choosing my comfort over your well-being. Why? It was the only word I could manage, but it contained 25 years of pain. Wayne rubbed his face with trembling hands. I need to show you something. But first, I need to tell you the truth about your mother. Your real mother. My heart stopped. What are you talking about? He pulled out a manila folder from under a stack of papers, his movements careful, secretive. Inside were documents I'd never seen before, photos of a woman who looked startlingly like me. Her name was Grace. You have her eyes, her smile. She died in a car accident when you were 2 years old. Helen. Helen is your stepmother. The world tilted. Everything I thought I knew about my life rearranged itself like a kaleidoscope. You lied to me. My whole life, you lied to me. Helen insisted, Wayne said weakly. She said it would be easier for you if you didn't know. That you'd feel more included in the family if you thought she was your real mother. Included? I laughed bitterly. She treated me like a servant. I know. God, I know. And it got worse after she had the twins. She saw you as competition for their inheritance, a threat to their future. She systematically worked to break your spirit so you'd never challenge them. He showed me more documents, my original birth certificate listing Grace Morrison as my mother, their marriage certificate, and then the most shocking discovery of all, my father's original will. Everything had been left to me. The house, his investments, even a life insurance policy Grace had insisted on. All of it was supposed to be mine. What happened to it? I asked, though I already suspected the answer. Helen happened, Wayne said, pulling out more papers. She's been slowly transferring everything into her name or the twins' names. Forgeries, mostly. I was too sick and too medicated to notice until recently. She's been drugging me, Jocelyn. Keeping me compliant. He showed me bank statements, forged signatures, property transfers. The scope of Helen's deception was breathtaking. But that wasn't even the worst part. Wayne pulled out his phone and played a recording. Helen's voice, talking to someone on the phone while she thought Wayne was unconscious. He won't last much longer. Once he's gone, we'll put Jocelyn's name on a few credit cards, max them out, destroy her credit completely. She'll never be able to fight us for the estate if she can't afford a lawyer. The twins deserve everything. That girl was never meant to be part of this family anyway. There's more, Wayne said, his voice getting weaker. Aunt Ruth. She knew Grace, they were close friends. After Grace died, Ruth tried to get custody of you. She had documents proving Helen was already mistreating you, even as a toddler. Helen fabricated abuse allegations against Ruth, claimed she was an alcoholic who had inappropriate contact with children. All lies, but it was enough to keep the courts from giving Ruth custody. My hands were shaking. Aunt Ruth had tried to save me and had been punished for it. Did she have something to do with Aunt Ruth's death? Wayne looked away. I don't know. I've wondered. The timing was suspicious, right after Ruth told me she was going to try again to help you. But I have no proof. Why are you telling me this now? I asked. Why not years ago when it could have made a difference? Because I'm dying, he said simply. And I've realized that my cowardice didn't just hurt you. It destroyed you. I watched Helen break you down piece by piece, and I did nothing because it was easier than fighting with her. I'm giving you these documents because it's the least I can do. Evidence of the forgeries, the recordings, everything. Maybe you can use them to get some justice. Justice? I stood up, suddenly furious. You think some papers make up for 25 years of abuse? For stealing my mother from me? For letting that woman torture me while you sat in this room and pretended not to see? No, Wayne said quietly. Nothing makes up for it. But maybe it's enough to help you take back what's yours. To finally make them pay for what they did to you. We sat in silence for a moment before I heard a car in the driveway. Wayne's face went pale. That's Helen. You need to go. Take the folders, hide them. Don't let her know you have them until you're ready to use them. I grabbed the documents and headed for the back door, but stopped. Did you ever love me? Even a little? Wayne's eyes filled with tears. I loved you. I just loved my own comfort more. That's something I'll have to answer for soon enough. I slipped out the back as I heard Helen's key in the front door, her shrill voice calling out about Organic Market being out of Blake's special almond milk. As I drove away with the truth burning a hole in my passenger seat, I realized my entire life had been built on lies. But now I had the tools to tear those lies apart. The question was whether I had the strength to use them. Armed with the truth and the evidence my father had provided, I spent the next 2 weeks consulting with a lawyer who specialized in estate fraud and elder abuse. Martha Rodriguez was a fierce advocate who'd built her career on taking down predatory family members, and she reviewed my case with growing excitement. This is extensive, deliberate fraud, she said, flipping through the forged documents. The recordings are particularly damning. We can file criminal charges and civil suits. Helen could be looking at serious jail time. But before we could file anything, I received a frantic call from my father. His voice was barely a whisper. She knows. I don't know how, but she knows you were here. She's moving up her timeline. Please, Jocelyn, you need to come now. Bring help. I called 911 and raced back to Ohio, Martha following in her own car. The scene we arrived to was chaos. An ambulance was in the driveway, police cars lined the street, and Helen was on the front lawn, tears streaming down her face as she talked to an officer. My stepdaughter, she was saying as I approached. She's been harassing us for years. She showed up today demanding money, and when my husband refused, she pushed him down the stairs. My poor children witnessed the whole thing. Blake and Brittany stood behind her, both nodding solemnly. Blake had his arm around his mother, playing the protective son, while Brittany dabbed at her eyes with a tissue. They looked like a greeting card family dealing with a tragedy, and I was clearly cast as the villain. That's her. Helen pointed at me as I got out of my car. Officers, that's the woman who attacked my husband. I wasn't even here, I said, trying to stay calm. I'm just arriving now from Charlotte. I have receipts from the gas stations along the way. The officer looked confused, glancing between Helen and me. Ma'am, we're going to need to sort this out at the station. Wait, I said, remembering something. My father records everything on his phone when he feels unsafe. Check his phone. He told me he's been recording conversations for weeks. Helen's face went white. That's ridiculous. Wayne doesn't even know how to use the recording function on his phone. But the officer was already talking to his partner, who emerged from the house holding Wayne's phone in an evidence bag. As they loaded my father into the ambulance, still unconscious, I heard one paramedic tell another that the injuries weren't consistent with a fall. These bruises are older, and there are injection sites that look suspicious. At the police station, everything unraveled quickly. Wayne's phone contained dozens of recordings, including one from that day. The audio was clear, Helen discovering Wayne had given me documents, her rage, the struggle, and then a push and Wayne's scream as he fell. But even more damning was what Blake said afterward, "Is he dead? Did you kill him?" And Helen's response, "Not yet. But he served his purpose. Just stick to the story. Jocelyn did this." Brittany's voice came next. "Mom, I don't think I can pretend anymore. This is going too far." "You'll do exactly what I tell you," Helen snapped. "Unless you want to end up like her, scrubbing floors for the rest of your life. We've come too far to let conscience ruin everything now." The detectives played recording after recording. Helen drugging Wayne's food. Helen and the twins discussing how to frame me for financial crimes. Blake admitting to putting sedatives in my food when I was younger to make me appear unstable in front of teachers and relatives. Brittany describing how she'd spread rumors about me throughout high school and college to destroy my reputation. "I think we've heard enough," the lead detective said. Helen Henderson, "You're under arrest for attempted murder, elder abuse, fraud, and conspiracy." As they cuffed Helen, her mask finally slipped completely. She turned to me with such venom that one of the officers stepped between us. "You were never supposed to be part of this family," she screamed. "Your mother was nothing, and you're nothing. Everything I did was to protect my real children from you." Blake and Brittany watched their mother being led away, and for the first time in their lives, they looked genuinely scared. Without Helen directing their every move, they seemed lost, like puppets with cut strings. "This is your fault," Blake said to me, but his heart wasn't in it. "If you'd just stayed away, none of this would have happened." "No," I said firmly. "This is what happens when years of abuse finally come to light. This is consequences, something you've never had to face before." The investigation that followed was thorough and devastating for Helen's carefully constructed world. Forensic accountants found evidence of embezzlement going back 15 years. The university discovered the twins' application fraud and immediately expelled them. Credit card companies started investigating the fraudulent accounts in my name. Every thread Helen had woven into her web of deception was pulled loose. Wayne survived the fall but was paralyzed from the waist down. In the hospital, finally free from Helen's drugs and influence, he gave detailed testimony about years of abuse. He described how Helen had systematically isolated him from friends and family, controlled his medications, and threatened him whenever he tried to protect me. "I failed my daughter," he told the prosecutor. "I let my wife torture an innocent child because I was too weak to stand up to her. Whatever happens to me now, I deserve it. But Jocelyn deserves justice." The twins tried to cut deals, claiming they were victims of Helen's manipulation too. But the recordings contradicted their claims of innocence. Blake was heard laughing about putting ipecac in my food before an important exam. Brittany was caught on tape describing how she'd intercepted acceptance letters from other colleges so I'd think Northwestern was my only option. "We thought it was just pranks," Brittany whined in interrogation. "Mom said Jocelyn was trying to steal our future, that we had to protect ourselves." "By torturing her?" the detective asked. "By stealing her identity? By drugging her? Those aren't pranks, those are crimes." As the full scope of what had been done to me became public, people who'd stood by and watched for years suddenly wanted to share their stories. Mrs. Patterson told investigators she'd seen Helen lock me outside in winter as punishment. Former teachers came forward with documented concerns that had been dismissed. Even some of the twins' friends admitted they'd always thought something was wrong with how I was treated. But perhaps the most shocking revelation came from Aunt Ruth's former lawyer. He'd kept copies of everything, including a private investigator's report Ruth had commissioned. The PI had documented Helen's abuse, taken photos of me doing heavy labor while the twins played, recorded instances of Helen taking my work money. Ruth had been building a case to remove me from that home when she died. I always suspected foul play, the lawyer admitted. Ruth was healthy as a horse, then suddenly dropped dead of a heart attack right after telling me she was ready to file for custody. But I had no proof. The police reopened the investigation into Aunt Ruth's death. While they couldn't prove murder after so much time had passed, they did find that Helen had researched various poisons online in the weeks before Ruth died. It was circumstantial, but it added another layer to the portrait of a woman who would do anything to maintain control. The trial of Helen Henderson became something of a local sensation. The story of a stepmother who'd enslaved her stepdaughter while spoiling her biological children struck a chord with people who'd experienced similar family dynamics. The courthouse was packed every day with observers, many of whom approached me during breaks to share their own stories of being the family scapegoat. Martha Rodriguez, my attorney, was brilliant in her systematic destruction of Helen's defense. Helen had hired an expensive lawyer who tried to paint her as an overwhelmed mother doing her best with a difficult child, but the evidence was overwhelming. "Ladies and gentlemen of the jury," Martha said in her opening statement, "what you're going to hear over the next few days isn't just a story of abuse. It's a story of calculated, deliberate torture of a child that lasted for over 2 decades. Helen Henderson didn't just fail as a stepmother. She actively, consciously, and methodically destroyed a young girl's life to benefit her biological children." The prosecution presented evidence methodically. Financial records showing every dollar I'd earned from age 14 had gone into accounts controlled by Helen. Medical records documenting my hospitalizations for exhaustion and malnutrition, while the twins' medical files showed regular checkups, orthodontia, and elective procedures. School records comparing my straight A's with no recognition to the twins' mediocre grades celebrated with parties. When Blake took the stand, his arrogance had evaporated. Under oath, he admitted to years of participating in his mother's schemes. "She said Jocelyn was trying to take what was ours," he said, not meeting my eyes. "She made it seem like we were defending ourselves." "Did drugging her food seem like self-defense?" the prosecutor asked. "Mom said it was just to keep her calm. She said Jocelyn had mental problems and this helped manage them." "And you believed that?" Blake shifted uncomfortably. I wanted to believe it. It was easier than admitting we were hurting her for no reason. Brittany's testimony was even more damaging to Helen's case. Perhaps because she'd always been slightly less cruel than Blake, or perhaps because she saw the writing on the wall, she decided to tell everything. "Mom started when we were really young," Brittany said, tears streaming down her face. "She'd tell us stories about how Jocelyn's mother had tried to steal everything from her, and now Jocelyn was doing the same thing. She made us believe we were in danger, that if we didn't keep Jocelyn down, she'd destroy our lives." "And you never questioned this?" the prosecutor pressed. "Sometimes I did. Like when Jocelyn graduated at the top of her class and Mom wouldn't even let her go to the ceremony. Or when she worked double shifts and came home to cook our dinner. But Mom always had an explanation. She said Jocelyn was manipulating us, trying to make us feel guilty so we'd let our guard down." The most powerful testimony came from my father. Wheelchair-bound now, he was wheeled into the courtroom looking frail but determined. He detailed years of Helen's manipulation, the drugging, the financial fraud, and finally, the attempted murder. "I am not asking for sympathy," Wayne said, his voice stronger than it had been in years. "I failed my daughter in every way a father could fail. I chose my own comfort over her safety. I watched her suffer and did nothing. But I can do something now. I can tell the truth." He looked directly at me then. "I'm sorry, Jocelyn. I know that's not enough, will never be enough. But I want the court to know that everything that happened to you was wrong, and I was complicit in it. You deserved so much better." Helen took the stand in her own defense, and it was a disaster. Her lawyer had clearly advised against it, but Helen's narcissism wouldn't allow her to stay silent. She tried to paint herself as a victim, claiming I had always been jealous of the twins, that I had mental health issues, that she'd done her best with a difficult situation. But Martha was ready. She played recording after recording of Helen's own words, each one contradicting her testimony. Helen planning to destroy my credit. Helen laughing about taking my college fund. Helen instructing the twins on how to gaslight me. You said in this recording, and I quote, "She was never meant to be part of this family." What did you mean by that, Mrs. Henderson? Helen's mask slipped. I meant that she wasn't my child. She was a burden I inherited, a reminder of the woman who had my husband first. Was I supposed to love her like my own children? You were supposed to not torture her, Martha said simply. The verdict was swift. Guilty on all counts. Elder abuse, attempted murder, fraud, conspiracy, theft. The judge, a woman who'd maintained a stoic expression throughout the trial, finally showed emotion during sentencing. In my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such a calculated campaign of cruelty against a child, she said. Helen Henderson, you took a motherless 2-year-old and systematically destroyed her childhood, her opportunities, and very nearly her life. You perverted the sacred trust of a parent and turned a home into a torture chamber. I sentence you to 25 years in prison. Helen screamed as they led her away, still blaming me, still claiming she was the victim. But her power was gone. She was just a woman in an orange jumpsuit, facing the consequences of her actions for the first time in her life. The twins faced their own legal troubles. While they avoided jail time due to their ages when most of the crimes were committed and their cooperation with prosecutors, they faced massive civil judgments. The university scandal made them unemployable in any legitimate field. The friends who'd celebrated their fake achievements abandoned them. The life of privilege they'd built on my suffering crumbled overnight. Wayne changed his will, leaving everything to me and explicitly disinheriting the twins. He spent his remaining months in a nursing home, trying to make amends in small ways. I visited him twice. Not for him, but for me. I needed to say things, to purge the poison of decades of silence. I forgive you, I told him shortly before he died. Not because you deserve it, but because I deserve to be free of this anger. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. It doesn't mean we're okay. It just means I'm choosing to let go of the hold you all had on me. He cried then, understanding that this was more grace than he had any right to expect. I love you, Jocelyn. I've always loved you. I just loved myself more. I know, I said. And I left him there with his guilt and his tears, finally free to live my own life. Here I am now, at 28, standing in the kitchen of what used to be my childhood prison. But it's not the same kitchen anymore. After my father died and I inherited everything, I gutted the place and transformed it into something beautiful. Where Helen's family rules once hung, there's now a sign that reads "Everyone is welcome here." The house that was once a monument to cruelty has become a transitional home for young adults escaping abusive families. The twins reached out last month. They're living in a small apartment, working minimum wage jobs, learning what it means to actually work for survival rather than comfort. Blake sent a long email about how sorry he was, how he finally understood what I'd gone through. Brittany left a voicemail crying about how hard life was, how unfair it all felt. I responded with a simple message: I worked for everything I have since I was 5 years old. Now it's your turn to learn. I won't help you, but I won't hurt you either. That's more grace than you ever showed me. I included a link to job placement services and blocked their numbers. Some might call it cold. I call it boundaries. Helen writes from prison occasionally. The letters used to be full of rage and blame, claiming I'd destroyed her family, that I'd stolen what belonged to her children. Recently, they've shifted to self-pity and requests for commissary money. I return every letter unopened. She can't hurt me anymore, but I also owe her nothing, not even the energy it would take to read her words. The support group I started meets in the living room where I once served my family dinner while standing because there wasn't enough room at the table for me. Every week, a dozen young people gather to share their stories of family scapegoating. We talk about the unique pain of being tortured by people who were supposed to love you, of watching siblings be cherished while you were despised, of being gaslit so thoroughly that you questioned your own reality. Last week, a young woman named Trinity shared how her mother made her sleep in the garage while her siblings had bedrooms. Another member, James, talked about being forced to drop out of high school to work while his brothers went to private school. Their stories are different in details but identical in pain. I see myself in all of them, and they see themselves in me. Together, we're rewriting our narratives from victims to survivors. I finally tracked down my biological mother's family. Grace had a sister in California who wept when she heard my voice. "We looked for you," she said. "After Grace died, we tried to find you, but Helen blocked us at every turn." Your mother would be so proud of who you've become, not because of what that woman put you through, but in spite of it. I have cousins now, real family who invite me for holidays and call just to chat. They share stories of my mother, who was apparently fierce and independent and wouldn't take nonsense from anyone. "You're just like her," my aunt says. "Same fighter spirit, same kind heart. Helen tried to break you, but she couldn't break what Grace put in you." The scholarship fund I established in Aunt Ruth's name has helped 17 young people escape abusive homes and attend college. Each recipient reminds me that Aunt Ruth's love wasn't wasted, that her fight for me continues through them. I speak at conferences now, sharing my story with social workers and teachers, helping them recognize the signs that everyone missed in me. If I can save even one child from enduring what I did, then maybe all that pain served a purpose. My therapist says I've made remarkable progress, but healing isn't linear. I still sometimes wake up at 5 in the morning, my body conditioned by decades of servitude. On those mornings, I make myself tea and sit in my peaceful kitchen, reminding myself that I'm safe now. That no one can ever again make me small, make me servant, make me less than. The greatest revenge isn't the inheritance or seeing Helen in prison or watching the twins struggle. The greatest revenge is my joy. It's the life I've built, the love I've found, the peace I've cultivated. It's knowing that while they made my childhood a hell, they couldn't touch my future. Every happiness I experience is a victory they can't take away. To those of you watching who recognize yourselves in my story, who are the scapegoat in your family, who do all the work while others get all the love, I want you to know something. Their treatment of you says nothing about your worth and everything about their character. You are not crazy. You are not oversensitive. You are not the problem. You are surviving something that no child should have to survive. Your liberation begins the moment you stop seeking approval from people committed to misunderstanding you. It begins when you realize that the love you're chasing from them is love they're incapable of giving, not because of who you are, but because of who they are. It begins when you choose yourself, even if that means standing alone. I won't lie and say it's easy. Choosing yourself after a lifetime of being taught you don't matter is the hardest thing you'll ever do. But it's also the most important. Because you do matter. Your pain matters. Your dreams matter. Your life matters, and it's yours to live. So if you're watching this from a house where you're the servant while others are the royalty, start planning your escape. Document everything. Save money in secret. Build relationships outside the family. Get therapy if you can. And remember that their power over you is temporary, but your power over your own life is forever. Before I end this story, I want to ask you something. Have you ever been the family scapegoat? Have you watched siblings be treasured while you were treated like hired help? Share your story in the comments if you feel comfortable. Sometimes just being heard is the first step toward healing. If this story resonated with you, please hit that like button and subscribe to this channel. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that they're not alone in their struggle. And remember, your story isn't over. The best chapters are the ones you write yourself, free from anyone else's expectations or limitations. Thank you for listening to my journey. Whatever your struggle, whatever your pain, I see you. I believe you. And I promise you, it gets better. Not because they change, but because you do. You realize your worth isn't determined by their treatment. You discover strength you didn't know you had. And one day, you'll look back on all of it and realize that while they thought they were breaking you, they were actually forging you into someone unbreakable. Until next time, remember, you are not what they said you were. You are what you choose to become. And that choice? That's yours alone to make.